All right, I'm back. And I feel the need to say some things before we hit the ground running again. And I go back to seriously endangering my health through the effort it takes to produce material constantly, which I do enjoy doing. This will mostly be me talking, really more suited to a podcast of sorts. Won't be drawing pictures in this one. So here is a cat. I'm told that people on the internet like cats. Please enjoy. It would seem many people are saying that the biomechanical model of manual therapy has been disproven or is dead. Now, I always assume that I'm a failure and that my life efforts are futile, but just in general, though, not specific to this particular situation. So this did confuse me hearing this. I started reading, which is just what you have to do to get clarity. I have to mention Dr. A.L. Lederman specifically. Really did a good job explaining several components of this, the back pain and postural components in particular. And though I don't fully agree with some of his conclusions, that's just the case. But based on the info, he has every reason to make these conclusions. So I want to pay respect to that. So there's solid related research, yes, but there seems to be the research and then what people have said and repeated in social media about the research. Social media can amplify certain elements of the truth without telling the full story. Sometimes. Ultimately, I understand older elements of the biomechanical model have been disproven, and I will explain that shortly. But that doesn't somehow mean biomechanics or their impact on pain and health are irrelevant, non existent. Physics doesn't just stop when it gets to the human body. Position and structure are still components of life, and they're not the only ones, of course. I would never say that. The information largely needs to be updated in a full body and integrated way. That seems to be what's missing. I'm going to try my best to present the information to the best of my ability. We'll have to use theory where a study is not possible, and so we may have to wait some time until those points are proven or disproven. Should be like 20, 30 years tops. And during that time, countless new arguments will be proven, disproven, and reproven over and over again. That's just how these things work. So, I will say, as far as I can tell, this is what is being said to be the pure structural biomechanical model. I'll read these out one by one. There is a specific ideal posture for everyone, which implies a staticness, a rigid kind of structure for that posture. Point number two, posture or asymmetry alone by itself can cause pain. Point number three, a single segment alone being out of place can cause pain. Fourth point, degeneration of the body as detected by MRI, CT, and ultrasound, for instance scans, is a definite cause of pain. Abnormal movement patterns cause pain, and the last point, concavity and convexity of the spine are causes of pain. And just understand, these are to be taken as absolutes. If they exist in all situations, they are causes of pain. And truthfully, until I did a good amount of reading, I wasn't aware that this was still being passed off as a biomechanical model. Because ultimately, these points taken as 100% true are very much incorrect. They're just not right. The biomechanical model has evolved, and it did evolve some time ago. And this is not really a reflection of what it is currently. Now, I'm certainly guilty of implying these points at times. I will freely admit that. I've probably implied that many times, in fact. But I hope you'll understand that this list is missing some of the bigger understandings of anatomy and physiology. Back to the cat. Based on this list, right off the bat, we can say that this way of looking at pain, for instance, is lacking an allowance for posture and movement that are individual to a person. in that an individual can have a posture and a way of moving that's very different, and it's not a problem at all. It also does not allow for flexibility within that posture, the ability to move within different postures or stay in different postures and still be okay. As well, global and integrated biomechanics that occur unified throughout the body are absent from that list. And these are all problems with it. These are things I'll definitely address partially in this video and later in other videos. So I do need to say, before anyone loses their mind, because I imagine there are a few professions freaking out if you haven't already heard this, many of the applications of manual therapy, despite all this, are still totally effective. Whether anything I say is true or not, many of the ways manual therapists work to make a person healthier and less in pain are still effective regardless of new research coming out. Because largely this research seems to be explaining why something is effective and why it works for other reasons than we knew about. And that seems to be across the board, hands on or even exercise based. They're finding new reasons to explain the same things, and the old ones just aren't as relevant. So it means that you can still be helping someone, believing it's working for one reason, and be totally wrong about that reason, but still fully able to help someone. And this has always been the case. Research is ongoing, everything is changing. Every few years, with any given subject, something, and then usually many things come out that show the understandings and justifications for what you're doing weren't accurate. But it doesn't mean necessarily that you were doing or implying what you've been doing and applying for all this time. It doesn't mean it no longer works. For instance, in many ways, the sliding filament model of muscle contraction is still considered a theory. If we found it worked differently, it doesn't mean loading a muscle no longer builds it. This change in understanding over time is normal and frankly a good thing. Because of it, at times we may be able to come up with better ways, more efficient ways of doing the same thing because of that research. It may just be uncomfortable at the time of change. That's just what you have to live with, especially if you want to deal with the human body and health and wellness and strength and all that stuff. To start explaining why some of the old elements of biomechanical model need updating, I have to say that much of this information is coming from compiled studies of asymptomatic body parts and, as well, pain science. And I can assure you this is good information. It's high quality information. It reveals important truths about the body, and one very specific truth is that there can be what we currently call degeneration of the body by definition. This degeneration that does not cause pain, nor does it predict pain up to a decade later, after quite a bit of time. This degeneration has actually been found. So essentially what we're seeing is that there are studies based on high quality scans, that's MRIs, CTs, ultrasounds, the best scans we have currently. And the scans are done of any asymptomatic body part. That could be the knee, the shoulder, the spine, for instance. And we find that there is degenerative disc disease, or what we consider tissue degeneration, and small tears in the tissue. And these have no pain associated with them. So what we normally consider damage and poor postures is not actually causing any pain. This is the truth. It's not associated with pain. So you could be walking around with these things yourself. Partial muscle tears, disc bulges, with no pain whatsoever. What we've called in the past musculoskeletal damage is not causing pain. And in fact, then they will follow up with these people 5 and up to 10 years later, and that supposed damage. And the people without these issues have the same likelihood and unlikelihood to have pain. So it means that you could have all these things and 10 years could go by and you're relatively pain free, or whereas someone else who has a lesser version of it or very little has more pain than you. Personally, I'd like to see 20 and 30-year data, see what the effects are at that point. But, can one ever truly be satisfied? Probably not. It's likely that the reason this was going unnoticed previously is because CTs and MRIs, ultrasounds, they're expensive traditionally. And typically, you would only do the scans when a person was in pain, or if something was clearly torn or broken, like if you got tackled sideways and your knee is now also sideways. That's a great reason to do a scan for sure. We're going to ignore that little part for now, though. So, if you found these less significant degeneration signs and the general postures that go along with them, we would assume that the pain was based on those findings, which is a reasonable assumption. But collective assessments were done on asymptomatic body parts, and it was found that they really don't guarantee pain, these signs of degeneration. So this means that position and or posture alone, and that's a very important word there, position or posture alone can't be the cause of pain. This means that so-called degeneration or degenerative changes alone can't be the cause of pain. But we could take this in a very different way, an alternate interpretation, if you will. What is definite is that many of the bone and tissue changes, such as disc bulges and posture, are normal compensations to regular use and gravity over time. This is clear, it is normal to some extent. We're all falling forward and gradually being squashed. It's inevitable. But this doesn't mean that altered shape or tissue tears or tissue changes, it doesn't mean they do not cause problems. You have to be clear about that. It doesn't mean that just because they can be asymptomatic, it doesn't mean they're always asymptomatic. It likely means that there are other elements that we can't actually pick up yet in these scans, or criteria that we're just not looking for, that can turn these things into problems. For instance, a disc bulge or a partial tear in a ligament may not cause pain by itself, but combine it with an altered inflammatory state or altered neurovascular response, and we may see pain and dysfunction occur. Again, a more complete picture of the body is needed to update and understand the process. So just throwing all these scans out as unimportant is a really bad idea. We know when more severe, they very obviously can be associated with pain. Broken bones are a real thing. Full thickness tears of a muscle are a real thing. And to say that it's all garbage is like saying that the radiologists and surgeons who have used this info in the past didn't help people because of it. It's like saying they don't know what they're doing, and clearly this is not the case. So I really don't think we can say yet that these changes have no clear association with pain, these degenerative changes, when they can't even be clearly associated with actually being damage. It doesn't really make sense. We need better criteria for differentiating what was truly a problem and what can be compensated for. When that's done, we may be able to establish a better link between position, deformation, and pain. But until you can clearly define the difference between actual damage and normal changes, you can't just divorce pain from structural position. I'm going to make an extra point here just for fun. The pain science and pain research, or the community that's involved around that, are saying that pain is a product of a larger scope of things. And this is inclusive of the environment of the person, the environment that you're in, and the psychological and social elements of your life. That these things can be just as, if not more than at times, more of an influence on the pain than what the body is doing. And this is incredibly important to say, something that's gone either unnoticed or undervalued for way too long. The mental health elements of our body health need to be thoroughly explored, and I'm glad to see that this is happening. This is a very good thing. Because I see this point being said a lot by people within the exercise and manual therapy communities. It's something you do have to be incredibly cautious about making these statements. If you're not a person allowed to work with mental health, because that's its own separate speciality, like you can't, not anyone can do it. It should be something that you do not do yourself. Depending on where you live in the world, that may be illegal for you to step outside your bounds like that. One thing we can say though, through working with the body with either exercise or manual therapy, one thing we're capable of is improving the health and the state of pain in the body, such that the person is better capable of making positive life choices. You can't control their thoughts, nor should you thoroughly investigate them unless you are very well trained to do so. You can't control the behaviors and the neurochemicals of the brain, but you may be capable of assisting that person controlling it themselves, whether that's following through on dietary changes or even seeking out professional help when necessary. Okay, now I need to make everybody angry. Ahem. Said by the same people, some of the same research is also saying that general exercise is just as useful in alleviating pain as specific exercises. So, a lot of the extra training of exercises for specific pains and body parts is, in fact, unnecessary. Don't all get mad at me. Here's the thing I would like to make clear you need to know what your goals are in manual therapy or exercise. And it's not really about achieving a pain free state, it's about achieving health. Your clients most definitely want to be pain free, and that's a good goal for them. That's a very good goal. But that's not always a great goal for their progression, because pain and health are two different things a lot of the time. Pain can occur in the healthy, and pain science would say that based on the different parts of the CNS, the higher parts of it, what you could call the supraspinal centers, you might know it as the brain or different parts of the brain, that the supraspinal centers or supraspinal areas can sustain the sensation of pain long after tissue damage has occurred and resolved. So even though the tissue itself, whether that's the muscle, the skin, whatever's been damaged, even though that's healed, the supraspinal centers, the parts of the brain, can actually keep that sensation of pain going even after that's all gone. And to the best of the current research's ability, this is a big part of what we consider fibromyalgia, for instance. So pain can occur in the healthy. On the other hand, pain can be absent in the very unhealthy, whether that's based on the biomarkers of health or being pain free with a very poor diet and a sedentary lifestyle, or cardiovascular damage, which often goes unfelt, or some types of cancer that can be lethal or can also be pain free. Pain is not the ultimate criteria for how someone is doing, and we need to keep that in mind. The reality is that to live entirely pain free is it's a fairy tale anyways. Pain is one of the most normal physiologic expressions in the body, and when appropriate, can be a part of the normal feedback regulating the body. Health, of course, can be very difficult to measure. But to be more capable, more enduring, mentally and physically, and more capable of tolerating different forms of stress throughout life, and tolerating well, taking it in stride, this becomes evident in the patient. Really, you tell me that a really well done, fully involved exercise done consistently over time, tell me that that exercise doesn't improve every part of your life, physically, mentally, socially. Being free of pain is a step in the right direction, absolutely. I have no doubt of this. But if you're pain free and still exhausted and still uncomfortable in your body, there's still a ways to go. I feel I need to mention this as another aside. I think, despite all these studies being of high quality, and hard to argue, I think things would change drastically if the findings related to these scans don't predict pain, but do predict a sedentary lifestyle based on their severity. A sedentary lifestyle is not painful necessarily, often it's quite pain free, at least for a while, but it does tend to associate with lower quality of life and risks for other health problems. Now would be a good time to mention that the full versions of these studies I need to review cost a bunch of money. A lot of studies means, well, a lot of money. If you want to help me with that in any way, I do have an app and some slightly confusing artwork that is also money. SimpleLinesAnatomy.com. Another step in the right direction. With what I've seen on social media, there seems to be a lot of division. People pushing their views by taking down someone else's, and I don't think that's in anyone's best interest. Regardless of the field you work in, one thing that does tie us all together is finding a way to get people moving better can result in health. Movement and health are tied together, and there's going to be a lot of different ways to do that. No method will truly be superior to another, but much of the time there can be one methodology that is best for one person right in front of you. Going back to the original idea, it's interesting to witness many of these arguments being made, because we also have mounting evidence saying a different thing when it comes to health, saying that movement is in fact a fundamental component to body function down to a cellular level. And this would be through the field of mechanotransduction, wherein it has been shown that most cells related to many of the organ systems, as well as the musculoskeletal system, detect and alter the function based on movement. So that means they change what they're doing. These cells change what they're doing based on them being moved at certain rates and speeds and amounts. And of course, there are many other things that influence cellular function. This is just one of them we're mentioning. But we know that movement just happens to be one of those components. Globally, as well, movement and mechanics are being interconnected by the fascial research field. I do have to say that when applying this to the body, it is still in its theoretical stages. But the justification for these things, they are good. Over the next few months, I'll be putting out as much of this related to these concepts as I can, just because I feel it needs to be said and there are points to be clarified. I'm going to say a bunch of stuff, and as always, some of it will be right, some of it will be wrong, and I'm okay with that.